Hello, my name's Bev and I'm the author of the book Please Eat, A Mother's Struggle to Free Her Teenage Son from Anorexia, which describes our family's battle with the deadly eating disorder, anorexia nervosa, which my teenage son Ben developed back in 2009 when he was just 15 years old. Welcome to Chapter 2, which is called 6 Months Earlier, which, as the title suggests, backtracks to 6 months before the hospital incident. Chapter 2, 6 Months Earlier. We should have picked up on it sooner, but it isn't until the autumn of 2009 that the penny finally drops that our only child, Ben, is developing anorexia. When you have a son, especially a sporty, food-loving son, you don't expect them to get anorexia. Not that my husband Paul and I had ever given it any thought. At this point, eating disorders are about as far off our radar as you can get. So in the July, when 15-year-old Ben's passion for exercise and healthy eating starts to go extreme and he begins to lose weight, we assume it's just a teenage phase. So far we've got off lightly. Despite joking that Ben would turn into a moody monster at the stroke of midnight on his 13th birthday, the teenage angst never materialised. Until recently, that is, when he's become a lot more sullen and argumentative and increasingly obsessed with his appearance. Sometimes I find him leaning forwards and prodding his washboard stomach, claiming he's fat, or examining his face critically from every angle in the mirror. I tell him not to be ridiculous. The idea that our son could be sliding into something far more sinister than just angst doesn't register. It doesn't register with Ben either, because it isn't as if he sat down one day and said, "I'm going to get anorexia." None of us has the slightest idea what is happening, and by the time the penny drops, Ben is already being dragged under fast. It's the beginning of July, just a couple of weeks before the alarm bells begin to faintly ring in my head. Ben is representing his house in the school sports day, running in the 1500 metres against his friend Kieran. Ben appears confident and self-assured, determined to win. Yet I'm aware that there's still a bit of the inner critic inside his head that always manages to rob him of his newfound confidence, a legacy from primary school, the days when Ben would invariably be the one at the back of the race, plodding along reluctantly, visibly heavier than the other boys. The days when Ben would rather play quietly in a corner of the playground with his friend Peter than kick a ball around the yard. The days before Ben took up sport. How different Ben looks now. I doubt if his former teachers and schoolmates would recognise the tall, handsome, athletic young man who's about to win the 1500 metres. The whole of his house is cheering as he hurtles past Kieran to the finishing line, his arms raised in triumph, reminding me of last summer when he completed the gruelling 140-mile coast-to-coast cycle ride with his dad. I remember the photos we took just before this, in France. Little me standing beside a much taller and broader Ben, my whole being bursting with pride as a group of girls walked past, pretending not to glance back at the tanned teenager with the awesome physique and good looks. Is it my imagination, or has he lost a bit of weight since then? I make a mental note to make sure he doesn't get any slimmer. It doesn't suit him. Last year, the rugby coach moved him from number 3, meat, head and fat, as Ben put it, to number 8, meat, head and not fat, as his body got taller and leaner. They'll have to move him again if he's not careful. But there are 2 months to go before the rugby season, plenty of time for Ben to bulk out again. Meanwhile, I'm so proud of his victory I could explode. You know who I wish was here now? Timothy, the new boy who joined Ben's primary school in year 4. Lanky, curly-haired Timothy who turned Ben's final year at that school into hell. At first we thought that Timothy was another Peter, Ben's closest friend during the early years of primary school. Both Ben and Peter were quiet, studious, and had vivid imaginations. They'd lose themselves in a fantasy world inhabited by exotic creatures. Peter's bed would become a submarine tank or the gondola of an airship. And, on sleepovers, the boys would go late-night zombie hunting around Peter's huge house. As the boys grew older, it was Peter's dad who suggested Ben accompany Peter to Sunday morning mini rugby. Peter gave up after just one session, but, to our surprise, the sports-shy Ben stayed on and quickly became a star player. Then one day Peter moved away and Ben was left on his own. Not long after this, Timothy joined the school. Ben immediately made friends with him. And, as I watched the boys play happily together, I was confident that the gap left by Peter's departure had been filled. As time went on, however, Paul and I began to notice a distinct change in Ben's frame of mind at weekends. On Sunday evenings, his mood plummeted, and you could guarantee that he wouldn't sleep that night. He began to drag his feet on Monday mornings, and we couldn't figure out why. After all, Ben had always loved school. Then one Sunday, it all came to a head when we found him sobbing on the stairs. Ben was being bullied. Snide remarks, whispered insults, unpleasant teasing, pushes and shoves. Timothy was making Ben's life hell. I remember striding into school and insisting something was done immediately. The deputy head promised to have a quiet word with Timothy, who, she was certain, had no idea of the effect he was having on Ben, but she'd ask him to apologise anyway. Then the boys can shake hands and forget about it. So the boys shook hands, but Timothy didn't forget. He simply went underground. The snide remarks and threats became more secretive. The pushing and shoving were done out of teachers' sight. Nothing changed. If anything, it got worse, and the staff still refused to believe that the impeccably behaved Timothy was a bully. We offered to move Ben to another school, but he insisted on staying put. I've been here since the start, and Timothy's only been here since year 4. I'm not leaving now. Not now. I had to hand it to him. Ben had guts. So now, as Ben flies across the finish line, I wish that Timothy could see him. Made from concrete, rugby-playing Ben being cheered on by the whole school. Or rather, I wish Ben could bump into Timothy and punch his lights out. My mind rewinds back to those unpleasant days at primary school. By the time Ben sat his 11+ exam in the January of year 6 and won an academic scholarship to a fabulous independent secondary school, the bullying had sapped him of every ounce of confidence and self-esteem. Our GP referred Ben for counselling. It didn't work. The counsellor seemed more interested in my background, implying that I'd passed on my anxieties and insecurities to Ben. No wonder, she implied, Ben had allowed himself to be bullied. These counselling sessions, she said, would be used to toughen Ben up to face the bigger, more daunting world of senior school, which, she implied, could be a serious shock to the system for the ill-equipped. But far from being a shock to the system, Ben took to secondary school like a duck to water. No, it wasn't perfect, but at least Timothy wasn't there. Almost immediately, a supergroup of boys took Ben under their wing. Ben thrived, and before long he'd become one of the most popular boys in his social group. I remember thinking how most parents dread their child getting in with the wrong crowd. Thankfully, Ben couldn't have got in with a nicer bunch of boys. Ben's new school had a reputation for sport, especially rugby. It quickly became clear that Ben had a natural talent for the game. He was immediately snapped up for the rugby team and given the position of number 3, a position given to the biggest, toughest boys. Soon, Ben was playing rugby virtually every day of the week, including local club rugby on Sundays. Before long, all the puppy fat disappeared to be replaced with an awesome athletic physique. Over the next 4 years, Ben would transform from the quiet, overweight, bullied boy of primary school into an athletic, confident and popular teenager. We couldn't have wished for more. Being good at school carried a distinct kudos, and Ben began to revel in the attention he was getting. As the guy in the rugby team, Ben also had a natural shield against any potential bullying. Basically, it earned me respect, he'd tell me much later. For instance, if any of the other rugby guys were throwing their weight around in the common room and annoying my friends, I'd tell them to shut up and they would, instantly. Everybody listened to me. Back then, I remember Ben being involved in a plethora of activities: drama productions, the choir, a band, and of course sport. He was also excelling in the classroom, winning various merit awards and a prize on prize day. Meanwhile, his popularity continued to grow. Ben's birthday parties were legendary. His birthday is on the 23rd of December, and so, to avoid having a party right on top of Christmas, a get-together was usually scheduled for the last weekend of term. Even though Ben's attic bedroom is huge, we had to split the sleepover into 2 shifts, one set of boys on the Friday night and another on the Saturday. That's how popular Ben was. The first group would disappear up to Ben's room, only coming down for supplies of drinks, potato crisps, biscuits and cakes, and of course an enormous evening meal followed by the world's biggest breakfast. After all, they were growing teenage boys, weren't they? Saturday afternoon was a switchover when we'd meet up with the other group at the cinema, watch a movie and go to a pizza restaurant, the kind where you help yourself to endless ice cream and sprinkles, which of course they all did. Then the whole sleepover process would begin again, followed by more supplies of biscuits, drinks and potato crisps, plus an equally enormous breakfast on Sunday morning. No wonder they say teenage boys have hollow legs. Ben's 15th birthday party in December 2008 is the liveliest of all. By this time, Ben is at the peak of his popularity and confidence. There's so much noise, bumping, crashing and thumping going on in our attic that I'm worried it will bring the house down. The boys are constantly eating as usual. Well, what do you expect? They're teenage boys after all. I dig out yet another family-sized bag of potato crisps and some packets of cookies for Ben to take up the 2 flights of stairs to his room. After Christmas, I'm vaguely aware that Ben has put on a few pounds. Not unusual, I figure, considering how much we've eaten over the festive season. But I know that, once back on the sports field, Ben's weight will level out again, and it does. What I don't know is that, for quite some time now, the green shoots of something sinister have been sprouting in Ben's head. Deep down in the inner recesses of his mind, Ben is busy weighing up input and output in a bid to maintain the athletic physique he's acquired in recent years. Acutely aware that he's put on weight over Christmas, the next 6 months will be a constant struggle to stay slim. Extra pounds, Ben's convinced, could easily transport him back to the overweight, bullied boy of primary school. Yet he feels driven to binge. Unbeknown to us, he'll devour entire packets of biscuits or chocolates in one sitting, and then make himself do a lengthy run to burn it off, returning exhausted. Exercise, he believes, is what is keeping the dreaded pounds at bay. But increasingly, Ben is feeling lazy. He's had enough of all this sport and he's getting weary of rugby. and I can tell. One Saturday we drive up to Durham to watch his team play against the local school. Ben's lost his enthusiasm. He slouches around, complaining of a tummy ache, and eventually gets invalided off the pitch. I can sense the coach getting irritated. Meanwhile, Ben is convinced there must be a better, easier way to stay slim rather than thrashing it out on a freezing cold, muddy rugby pitch every day of the week. He's already secretly experimenting with food, but Paul and I scarcely notice what's going on. We put the growing fussiness down to being a teenager, and Ben didn't develop an attitude at 13, but by golly, he seems to be heading that way now. But on that sports day afternoon in July 2009, Ben is in a euphoric mood. As Paul and I watch him streak across the finish line, all we see is a boy who's thriving in every way. Good grief, at one point last term, I even toyed with the idea of writing to the headmaster to congratulate him on how the school had been the making of Ben. In the event, I will end up contacting the headmaster about something altogether different. Something I could never in a million years imagine we would have a conversation about. That's the end of chapter 2. Thank you so much for listening. And if you'd like to subscribe to my channel, please press the link below. And also, it would be great if you could like this video. The next video moves on to chapter 3, which is called Health Kick. You can go there by clicking the in-video link on the screen. I look forward to seeing you there. Oh, and don't forget to visit my blog. You'll find the link below. You'll also find a link to my website where you can download PDFs of my blog for free.